All right, we'll call to order this City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission Joint Workshop agenda for Monday, August the 18th, 2025 at 4 o'clock p.m. Roll call and certification of quorum. Madam Secretary, I certify City Council has a quorum present, with all members present with the exceptions of Member Chavarria and Member Koza. I know Member Koza will be out the remainder of the evening. Ms. Chavarria did indicate she may be here for the workshop or may not, so we'll catch her when she comes in. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Mayor. Everybody's present with the exception of Commissioner John McDonald. Couldn't be here this evening, so we've got a quorum.
All right. With that, any citizens' comments turned in? No. With that, we'll turn to the purpose of the workshop. Discussion regarding the Unified Development Code update. So with that, we'll turn it over to Vance. Good to see you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Cole, Council, Chair, and Commissioners for being here this evening. Excited to visit with y'all for our third UDC update workshop. This is number 3 of 5. Tonight, we're going to wrap up a couple of topics we haven't been able to get to just because of discussion on previous workshops. So a couple of things, just housing and signage are what we're going to visit about, certainly important topics. But just a reminder, there are no recommendations at this time. It's just discussion to get everyone's thoughts and feelings on these topics. And with that, I will bounce it to Claire with Design Workshop.
Thank you, Vance. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here with you again today. My name is Claire Hempel, and I'll be guiding us through this presentation today. So a quick overview of the plan. In our last meeting, we identified issues and opportunities for the second set of key topics, leaving housing and signage as the remaining items because those are worth a good discussion and not crammed into the last 15 minutes. So those will be our focus today. Let's see. Next slide. So we've already had a couple of touch points in April and June when we discussed the topics shown in the gray boxes, including land use, landscaping, food trucks, and more. Today, we're going to turn our attention to housing, including ADUs and signage, and we're really interested in hearing your input on these. Before we move on, it's just worth noting that several of today's topics, particularly housing, ADUs, and signage, have been the subject of recent Texas legislation. Since our last meeting, there have been updates on multiple state housing bills. While many don't currently apply to Pearland because of population thresholds, that could change soon. And with Pearland's population at roughly 133,000, just 17,000 residents shy of the 150,000 population mark for some of these bills, many of these laws could begin to apply in the near future. So we just wanted to call attention to that. All right, let's move on. So we're going to start with signage, and then we'll conclude today's workshop by focusing on housing. But as with our previous section, we have outlined a few key questions to help frame the discussion and guide conversation for each of the topics. So next. So why is this topic important? We're talking about signage today because it's essential. It identifies places, helps denote you're in a district or conveys important information, and helps people navigate the city effectively. So the goal behind updates on this section in particular is to clarify the intent behind signage and wayfinding standards and use diagrams in the code to communicate standards and intent, so making it very clear. We also want to ensure that the standards out of the main code section reference the main code section, so some cleanup there. Some of the identified key issues that we've been through early on. Some of the items in the code could benefit from clarification and reorganization, such as a lack of clear or complete purpose in the UDC. So the current sign code outlines what may be seen as rigid rules for height, size, and spacing across many sign types, making it too prescriptive and leaving little room for creativity or flexibility. One example of this would be the definitions are not consolidated and they're spread across different sections, so that makes it inefficient to reference the code. And second, the purpose and applicability and intent for signage are not clearly stated, which can lead to varied interpretations and leads to more staff time in trying to interpolate those. So thinking through clearer language, graphic examples, and illustrations can improve consistency and clarity. Some other things to note are outdated signage design in older areas. Permitting and enforcement of the sign code can be inconsistent with variations in how rules are applied across districts or different reviewers. There's a lack of a coordinated signage and wayfinding system, and mural standards are not defined. So these really great pieces of art that we see across the city and people really love, we need to think about how we might better define those and give some clarity in the code. So some initial recommendations include compiling signage guidelines and clearly stating standards and approval criteria for signs, including murals, temporary and freestanding signs, digital signs, and signs with light bulbs, and providing clear visuals that illustrate the intent and locations and types, and then clarifying when non-conforming signs must be removed. With that, I will open it up for discussion.
Thank you for that. Well, let's, Mr. Chairman, why don't we start with you guys, and then we'll come to council.
Thank you, Mayor. Brent? Go ahead, Tommy. You're good?
For me, signage, when I was involved with Shadow Creek, they had their own signage rules and regulations, but I had a taste of regulations with signage, and for me, there was a huge difference. We had an office condo complex. Huge difference between signage that goes out on the street versus interior signage. So any commercial development, I hope for traffic's sake and for public safety's sake, that sign identifiers, meaning arrows, or to this building, to that building, not necessarily if you want to go to Dr. X's office, you go this way, but building this, building that, some identifiers, those shouldn't be counted as signs. Maybe there's a standard that we have, but it shouldn't take away from the signage that you're allowed on the street or elsewhere. Anyways, that was my comment.
Okay, I think the building window signs is a part of this category. Can you confirm?
Correct.
Okay, so I think the only thing that really stands out to me that can kind of get cluttered and maybe look a retail center look tacky is when they put a lot of advertising, big images in their windows, and it's kind of going above and beyond them identifying, hey, this is this business. They're trying to advertise every little thing they do in the business. So I think there's a difference between like we're open sign or something they might put little bitty in the in the window, versus like a very large, like I can see it driving down 518 and it's littered the whole retail window space. I'm not sure what you guys have recommendations on that.
I think
already.
Yeah, I think it is just making it clear what is allowed, but we also want to make sure we're complying with freedom of speech and the big issues regarding that. But it's a good comment, and we'll make note of that.
The only thing I have a question about is the murals. When we're doing murals as such, I'm assuming that they have to come in and give a plan of it, and the layout of it, or what it's going to be.
Vance or Martin, do you want to talk about that process currently with the murals?
So currently murals, we don't really have a specified definition for murals. How we've handled most murals is that we ask that it not be associated with some part of advertisement for, a business, such as, having a convenience store having a giant Coca-Cola advertisement. That would be similar because it's a product that they sell. Most of the time, and where I think we're looking to take the mural discussion is to allow for people to do that by right, to have an artistic design on a blank wall where it can really become a part of placemaking and a part of drawing people to that business, but not necessarily having it be a reflection of their advertisement or their direct advertisement.
Yeah, and if I could just real quick, I think Commissioner Eisenberg, with the recent adoption of our cultural arts master plan, it's just an opportunity for us to integrate some of that language into the UDC, because hopefully we start seeing that injected into development, and that way we know how to handle it as staff. We have good definitions and clarity on, hey, no, that's a sign. No, this is a true mural. That's a piece of public art, and how to handle that as staff. And then Commissioner Hendricks, I did want to bounce to you. I don't think your comment was about necessarily the content of the window signs as much as the percentage of coverage, and we definitely need to have some percentages on, like, we do have it for corridor overlay district, but we do need to have percentages. It would be great to have that type of clarity on, no, this is how much of your glass on a storefront can be covered.
Is that on?
And just to add on to Vance's comment there about the window signage, currently there are restrictions for window signs. You can have 25% of all windows, or you can have 50% of one window. But it is an issue that we run into with enforcement, as many people like to utilize all windows. So it becomes an enforcement issue as we run down each and every one of those.
So could the enforcement issue then go back towards the owner of the building? If they're a lease space, I think it needs to go straight to the building owner then, at that point, if they're violating it. Do we define who gets the ticket, or if there is a ticket or a fine?
I think there would be a combination in this situation. If staff can work with the tenant to get it corrected, that's fine. But if accountability needs to be sought elsewhere, we should definitely escalate appropriately.
Y'all done? Okay, go ahead.
One more small thing I meant to add. I do recall in 2000, I'm going to make up the date. I hope I'm close. 2006 to 2008, when the town center was gaining momentum. I recall sitting with council and P&Z, and we discussed ad nauseum the main sign, Old Town Center there, and the height was discussed and discussed and discussed, probably for, I'm going to say, a minimum of a couple of hours. And Mayor Cole, you recall that, I'm sure. So I left months later. I'm with my family, and I tell them, we debated this, we talked about it, we pulled up from Burlington Coat Factory, whatever that store is right there, got to the traffic signal. I said, you see that sign right there? Well, the one buried behind the traffic signal, you can't really see it right now, but that one. So all that, we thought we were smart.
Last thing I want to say is on the murals, I agree that as far as the arts in such as that, I know that a lot of people are in favor of that, but I think murals are subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder. And it's just, to me, there's a small, thin line between a mural and having a graffiti. And that's the only thing that I'd hate to see that out there on the main drag or something. I can see it in the Old Town site, in a lot of ways, but in some of our newer areas of town, I'm not so sure that would be something that we'd want to look at. So, but that's just my thoughts. Turn it over to you, Mayor.
All right, good deal. We'll turn it over to council for questions, comments, and concerns on signage. Mr. Carbone?
I'll echo Commissioner Eisenberg's comments on the murals. I've seen some stuff that is called art, and I don't know. I'm a numbers guy, but when you get into that, and I don't know how the guidelines or regulations go, but yeah, good luck with that. I don't know. That's a tough one because you're going to tell somebody no and piss them off, and they're going to fill the chambers, and then we can say it was staff's fault. So leave it as vague as possible. Just give all the authority to staff. I agree overall with all the initial recommendations on kind of simplifying and making it clear to navigate. I guess it doesn't. The way I see this is you're restructuring the UDC in relation to signage, but not any massive changes as no longer these signs can be allowed. I guess the last bullet point, clarify when non-conforming signs must be removed. That's a tough one. So you're going to tell a business that's been around for 50 plus years that nope, the expiration date on your sign is come and gone, and unless Matt's ready to stroke a check from the EDC, I don't see how we can do that. I mean, I grew up on 518, and if we had wind that blew our sign over, we were out at night or on the weekend to get it back up before the city caught that the sign fell down, because it'd be 20 grand to come out and replace it. And so I don't know. I get it would look good, but how can you tell a business owner that, you know, it doesn't meet the standard anymore?
Somebody has a pole sign versus a monument sign.
Right.
And,
Those are my comments on signage.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I would 100% echo Member Carbone. That was my main concern talking about signage, was not creating this system where we're going in and telling people who have no reason to change their sign, just that we want to, because the times are different. I also like, one of the things that we hear consistently is not losing the character of Pearland, and one of the ways you don't lose the character is you get to see that history. You can drive through town and see these older businesses and families that have been there for 50 years and things like that. So I'm fine with requiring to update signage when you have a situation where they want to go tear down their sign, or they haven't maintained it, they've allowed it to become a blight or something like that. Then okay, you've got to update. But just having anything in there that says we've changed our standards now across the board, across the community, everybody has to change. I don't think that is the community that we want to be as far as signage goes. I did look to see that when there are situations like damage or natural disasters that come in, that there's a ratio, I believe it's 60%, and Vance helped me with this, I think it's 60% of the cost of updating it to a new sign. If they can fix their existing sign for less than 60% of that, then they can do it. But if it's going to be more than 60%, then they have to tear it down and update to the new standards. Is that?
Yes, sir. And give me 1 second. I want to double check the percentages. And if I may, since I'm unmuted, that comment about clarify when non-conforming signs must be removed is not about, and just so we don't rabbit hole too hard on it, it's not about going through and saying, hey, your time's up. It's time to get right. It truly is about, is it evaluation? Hey, you're doing a $50,000 remodel or an X% of your valuation remodel. Now it's time to come into compliance. Or if there is a natural disaster, you're not going to get to put that non-compliant sign back up. None of this is saying we're setting a time clock at this date, everyone's getting right. It's not about that at all.
Read through.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Thank you. On the signs with light bulbs, is that LED signs as well?
Yes.
So approval criteria, aren't they prohibited? LED signs, or is that not all of them, or?
No, LED signs are allowed in certain areas.
You You can have an LED sign. You're talking about the strips. You're
Yeah, I'm talking about
where
the, I
the
guess I'm
signs
talking
are.
about the ugly.
That's what she's talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
most lights today are LED, and I think we want to encourage that. I think you're talking about
I'm talking,
the border sign, the
I
border
am.
lights. Yeah.
And that might be handled through the code by talking about a certain temperature or a Kelvin that is
Okay.
permitted.
so there's a lot of those signs, the ones I'm thinking of. When I think of LED signs, I think of the colorful ones that are really like down on Lucky Strike down there at the curve in 518. Those, I think, are the ones that, those are the ones I'm thinking of as LED strips and things that that are prohibited. Is she talking about you? All right, thank you, man.
I did want to intercede, Member Kate. I think that we've had some concerns with enforcement historically. I want to say it was at least 8 years ago, where strip light or LEDs on the inside of the windows did not meet the definition for the prohibitions for bulbs on the outside of the window associated with the sign itself. So it was more an issue of decoration of the building versus signs. And looking to see, there we go. I know that Martin had dealt with that issue, but it's been 8 years, so I don't know if you've looked at it recently.
I will say that standing up that program about the LEDs around the windows and doors, that has, in my opinion, been fairly successful at keeping that type of activity limited. I think part of what the sign discussion and might be leaning towards is just the bulbs that are exterior to the sign. And if that's the case, I can think of only a handful of signs that have those bulbs.
But if you wanted to prohibit, if you wanted to address bulbs in windows or door frames that aren't attached to a sign, that would be a different UDC revision. I think that that's really the point that I wanted to hone in. And if that's what council wants to address, I would encourage you to indicate as such so that staff and the consultants can look to see what appropriate regulations regarding that would be. Of course, it'll always come down to enforcement. And then, you know, I imagine that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would imagine there are at least 6 different opinions from City Council tonight on whether we want to address bulbs inside window frames and door frames. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 opinions about that from planning and zoning as well.
Questions, comments? Member Fernandez?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say that I agree with these recommendations, and I want to echo members of council that have already brought it up. I want us to be careful with those businesses that have been here for a long time. I think we are addressing it that way. I think we are going to be careful with it. I just want to be mindful, for us to be mindful that if it is a big problem, we can approach them, give them an opportunity. But like Vance was saying, it's not as if we're going to go in and force them to change it. But I'm just glad to hear that we're not going in and changing all these businesses. Thank you.
Mr. Patel?
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, Vince, and this thing, the freestanding pole signs, do we allow those anymore?
No.
Or is there height restrictions on those?
If it's a highway sign, like on 288 or something like that, there are different heights on those types of corridors versus, say, a 518 or Bailey or something like that. And I know the code speaks to it, but I couldn't tell you the exact height requirement.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is, I know we haven't seen any on 518, but 288, before it got annexed, there's the brake check.
Right.
Ugly looking sign, the pole's all dilapidated, and it's a red sign there, right? So I guess one of my things is trying to bring those pole signs now, getting away from them. I think that's really important to kind of, I'm not worried about the rest of it. I mean, it is important, but I think we want to try and get away from that corridor since we've spent all that money on 288 and have that big pole sign out there. And I don't know what the status is now. I thought at one point we weren't allowed that anymore in the city to have pole signs, but I know then you also have development that have multiple tenants, like Walmart. They put their signs with a bunch of tenants. And so I guess if there is a way to restrict the height, I think it's important on those. The monument sign, I think that's important, but I think we need consistency. I've seen some at, it seems like they're supposed to be at 6 or 8 feet, and some go a little bit higher. So along the freeway, I think, or highway or the roads, I think that's the consistency I'd like to see, but I don't really have any other comments. Thank you.
Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem has some comments, I think, from Ms. Chavarria on this, since she's not here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One has there been any consideration to creating signage standards that vary by district throughout the community, like historic signage or commercial corridors, anything like that? Have any thought along those lines?
I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that part of the UDC part of the Old Town study would recommend signage specific to the Old Town area, just to give kind of an obvious example. I know that's very obvious, but and then I would say along our corridors, which is what Member Patel was mentioning, along the corridor overlay district, we do have signage requirements that go above and beyond standard areas. And then Martin, correct me if I'm wrong, but pole signs are not allowed anywhere anymore?
Generally correct. There's a couple instances, such as Old Town. Old Town's very open in its signage. And then you can have a multi-tenant sign. It can be a pole sign, simply due to it having a kind of an H configuration to it, and it has those two legs that come down. But that is only for the 288 corridor. And that again involves it being a multi-tenant sign. Not a lot of people group together within that corridor to be a multi-tenant operation. They're more often single occupants with the out parcels. But generally speaking, it's very limited in amount of both places and areas where a pole sign could exist. We're very pro on monument signs.
And do the heights vary on the monument signs? I know at one time we put a max height, I want to say 15 feet, something like that on those.
Correct, Mayor. So generally speaking, a monument sign is going to be limited to 10 feet with a 2-foot base.
Okay. That's it.
The height and the width are a function of the amount of square footage that you get by district. And so really and truly, you could have a very skinny sign, but it's going to be limited to its 32 square feet if it's in a non-residential area, but then it can widen out as it gets into more commercial areas. But most people don't take up that 10-foot when you're limited on area. They go for a more human-scaled sign.
I'm sorry, Mr. Patel, you were reaching a minute ago. Okay. So just a couple, you got another one.
Yeah,
from
she
Ms.
just had one other. She wanted there to be some consideration about better wayfinding signage throughout the community, as far as navigating different corridors or districts that you're in, so you know you're in Old Town or Ivy or Lower Kirby or something like that. Just another perspective.
Okay.
And I just want to say thanks for reading those into the record. Member Chavarria did share those with us as well. And then just to circle back, Member Byram, to your question, the 60% is correct for bringing a damaged sign into conformance.
Yeah, so I just want to follow up. I just ask a couple questions before I get to, I think on the mural, it'd be nice to have some kind of standard, because I think we're going to be asked for more, not less. And so to have something that we can kind of at least give some guidance on, I think would be good. I would say, it's got to follow community standards, and then you're going to go, okay, well, what is that? And it's the same thing. There is a slippery slope there, so we've got to figure that out. And I think part of it may even go back to, does it involve our Visit Pearland group? If they're a part of that, is because it's part of the arts and culture plan. If it's all, kind of wrapped up in some of that, then we would have a better, thoughts around that than if it's just one weekend, we just want to do a mural, somewhere. So I think, trying to figure out something, because we're going to have more rather than less. When I see here digital signs, so I guess I was going to ask the question: what are we having a code enforcement issue with signage wise than anything? If we're having an issue with code enforcement, is it simply because they're just not following the rule altogether, or are we seeing a trend in certain areas, and do we need to address the trend in our code?
I would say it's, and Martin definitely jump in, but I would say it's certainly the percentage of window coverage on storefronts is the one that comes to mind first, and it is just folks not following the written rule we already have, and it just comes down to a volume issue when it comes to getting it enforced. We all know the stickers are crossed down, and then Martin, anything else?
The second one that I'm going to bring up is also directly related to a volume issue. People get sold on an LED sign that does very cool things because it's 2025 and we have 12K and all types of new great technology. But an LED display is supposed to have instantaneous transitions, and it's not supposed to have the movement and the animations and the things that current displays are very capable of doing, and is actually a feature of why you would get this upgraded sign. But the code, as currently written, is meant to not be a distraction to drivers, and is not supposed to be, or is supposed to be as limited as possible in its functionality.
I know on the digital signing, y'all had in the presentation, I think it's the one from the chamber. I know we had lots of conversations around that years ago, and it's the same thing. Whatever we would write into our code, as soon as you got it past technology upgrade, you might as well put you're going to go right back and have a public hearing and continually to change. And so we kind of came down we asked for text dot standards on a roadway, and from a timing standpoint, and a page turn, so there wasn't flashing. We didn't want the flashing. We wanted to make sure that at night the foot candles or whatever it was putting out wasn't so much that it was causing a distraction and flashing and too bright. And I can't remember how we landed on that, but we put some things in there just so it wasn't that. But then we did a page turn. The page turn couldn't be any greater than X seconds, whatever that was. And that's how it kept it from just flashing page turn and all those kind of things, but at the same time use the functionality of the sign. So I agree. I like the initial recommendations here as we kind of go through it. But I certainly, if there's a way that we need to, if we're seeing a code enforcement issue on the amount of signage in a window and those types of things, maybe we need to be more clear on our rules, in that area. If our rules are clear, then it just goes down to a volume and an enforcement issue. Then, that's a conversation we can have with code enforcement to make sure that we're doing that. So, last call, questions, comments up here. Member Carbone.
I appreciate the clarification on the non-conforming sign. By that, let's say it's a $50,000 rehab, but the sign may be another 20. Now you've always got that cliff where, okay, you're disincentivizing somebody to improve their property because they're going to trigger more improvements. And so I don't know how to navigate that, but that's always a tough one to deal with.
And I'll go back to planning and zoning. Mr. Chairman, if y'all have any wrap-up questions or comments?
I think to that point, that they could just make that 60% based on the building and not add in the cost of the sign, and then that way it shouldn't trigger it. Might be helpful. And then I just want to confirm, we do have a no flashing sign rule. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I mean, I'll add what I just said to Member Carbone. I think the way we navigate that is leave it alone. I know what you said, but again, I go back to there's no reason to change it just to change it. And I don't want to disincentivize people from updating their property by adding a $20 or $30 or $40,000 sign in there. And I also think, like I said previously, it helps us maintain that character and history throughout our community. As long as they keep it in good working order, they don't let it be a hazard, and keep it in good repair, then I think they can leave it. I would actually encourage people to leave their signage and maintain that history. So that, my 2 cents is leave it alone.
Turn it back to staff. Move on.
All right. Mayor Cole, if I could clarify one thing on the murals. Were you talking about potentially a committee that would review the artwork being proposed? That maybe
I don't know about a committee. I'm thinking I can see coming out of our arts and culture master plan that Visit Pearland is in charge of. I could see more mural type activity. In fact, I think, we've got some of these large commercial, warehouse distribution places. I could see murals as a part of that. And so I started once to say maybe it's a CUP process, and then that just puts it all up here. But I think trying to figure out how, there's some criteria of some sort in place. Maybe it's a staff level, but if there's something that needs to get kicked, it gets kicked to us for some clarification or something. But I think there needs to be something in place, because we're going to see more. We're going to see more, and it's going to be staff going, what do we allow? So I'd rather be intentional on what do we allow now, as opposed to somebody wanting to come in and do it. We talked to a group that came in that's looking at the 35 corridor for some industrial buildings. And we said, man, what a great opportunity as you're entering the city to have some mural space right there on the side of their building. You go over to League City, FM 518, on that corner there. I mean, that whole side of the building is welcome to League City in this huge mural. So I think tastefully there is, and I think we have to delicately figure out what's that criteria when it's something that's going to push the edge. Do we, nothing religious, nothing political, nothing sexual, nothing, there, and maybe that's the kind of, that we can put on it. And I'd let Lawrence and Darren opine on the First Amendment side, but number one, we're allowing it. So if we're allowing it in those types of things, I think we can regulate it. But I think we probably ought to take a stab at criteria, because we are going to see more.
Great,
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that was helpful. Thank you for the clarification. All right, we'll move on to housing. So some questions to consider as I'm going through the next few slides are, what are the top 2 to 3 housing or development challenges you're hearing from your constituents and community members? Number 2, what types of housing do you think Pearland is in need of? And then what concerns do you have about expanding housing options? We'll go to the next slide. All right, so housing is a key focus because, as we've heard through the comprehensive planning effort, there's a need to explore diverse housing options that support aging in place, affordability, and multi-generational living. Next slide. So why is this topic important? So on this graphic that you see here, this was an exhibit from a recent community impact report in July of this year that speaks to how average home prices are rising in the area, making home ownership less affordable for many residents. So there's new housing shifts to neighboring areas like Manville and Alvin due to availability of land and housing prices. It's making it less competitive for them to go there for first-time and middle-income buyers. So to address this, Pearland has an opportunity with the UDC update to stay competitive and inclusive by diversifying the types of housing that are out there, revisiting fee structures and encouraging development that fits within existing neighborhoods and the remaining tracts of land. Next slide. So the goal is to expand the housing stock and choice through innovative approaches and diverse housing typologies that will allow Pearland to better accommodate residents seeking to stay here throughout their life and their families to remain here as well. And this strategy is essential to retaining residents over the long term, fostering community stability, inclusivity, and sustained affordability. Next slide. Some of the key issues that we've identified over the past few months are a low housing diversity. So much of Pearland's housing has been built as detached single-family subdivisions with relatively large lots, resulting in low housing diversity. So just meaning a lot of the housing looks somewhat similar. This limits options for buyers with different needs and makes it harder to provide a full range of housing choices for the growing community. Next, there's a lack of attainable housing options. So the comprehensive plan talked about middle market housing options like duplexes, townhomes, and small multifamily units like cottage homes. And right now there are few incentives for developers to create these types of housing. The next one is low rental vacancies. This signals that there could potentially be a growing demand for rental options and a need for smaller housing types. Some of the residential zoning districts are geared towards low-density single-family types with a typical minimum range from 5,000 to 15,000 square feet. By contrast, missing middle housing is typically about 2,000 to 4,000 square feet lots or shared lots. There's a lack of pedestrian supporting infrastructure in residential areas. So these types of areas could benefit from additional pedestrian-friendly features like crosswalks, sidewalks, street lighting, and shade that could be provided through city initiatives or included as incentives for developers. And then finally, ADU regulations. So Pearland's UDC currently does not clearly address or define the allowance in support of ADUs or accessory dwelling units in most residential zoning districts. So this presents an opportunity to review and consider how ADUs might fit within the city housing goals and zoning framework moving forward. And Mayor, did you want me to go through the initial recommendations first? Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Some of the initial recommendations that we've listed here include diversifying housing stock and promoting missing middle or the middle market housing. So clearly including residential typologies like townhomes, duplexes, and triplexes, garden homes, etc. Live-work units would be included here where it's appropriate in certain neighborhoods. Encouraging well-designed, higher density housing and mixed-use developments in more areas of the city and not limited to highway corridors or special districts. Next would be reducing lot size, setbacks, and parking where possible. So diversify housing stock by allowing smaller lot sizes and reducing the associated development standards. Allowing for density bonuses that could give Pearland a market-driven, flexible strategy to encouraging a wider range of housing types and affordability levels. Permit clustering of smaller homes without altering the neighborhood character and incentivizing development on smaller lots. And a couple more, strengthening standards for build-to-rent communities and discussing strategies to allow ADUs. This might include developing a pre-approved ADU design to simplify implementation where appropriate. But regardless, we'd love to hear your thoughts on these and more.
While you're still at the mic, back up to allow density bonuses for attainable housing. Can you walk through and explain what that looks like?
Yes, one example would be, let's say they use some green building methods, solar panels or what have you. Then you could allow for 10% more of the units. So it's things like that. Perhaps there's ground floor retail and mixed use areas, so they would get an increase in the floor to area ratio.
All right, same thing, Mr. Chairman. Let's come to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Trey, you want to kick it off? Colleen? I know Henry's got some.
It's rare. Just if, while we're on this one here, initial recommendations, multifamilies, let's see, encouraged mixed use and high quality multifamily in more areas. That's a pretty big change. I think your comment was to other than areas near the freeways, right? I think a few council members, I say a few, a couple, ran on no more multifamily. And it's pretty much a no when multifamily comes out here. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just an observation. I don't know as we bring them into the areas off the freeway that there's more flexibility there. In fact, there's going to be more people showing up at the podium and protesting as neighbors do when multifamily comes in. So it's a wonderful comment, but I don't know practically for our city if that's going to happen. One of the things I'd like to, I have a whole page here, but I won't go through it because I think it was covered here. The history of cities and how we go from, and I'm watching it in other cities. In Florida, I'm dealing with a city of a population of less than 10,000 and watching how they're transitioning as Pearland did. And I sat through it 2000 to 2015. It was a great time to be involved with the city from a development standpoint. But cities transition from rural to suburbia, and those rules that get put in place are to keep those people out, or design. Wasn't the best verbiage I could have used, but keep a certain standard of economics and demographics coming in, not from a racial standpoint, not anything like that, but just an economic driver. 60-foot lots is the minimum. You see that up and down 288 now. Other towns are going to that. And here we are now transitioning into, hey, we'd like the missing middle rather than 60-foot lots. And I think there's still an inherent pushback from some persons on planning and zoning and perhaps council when it comes to those kind of things, as with ADUs. But I think being a town of infill, rather than a town of going to buy the next rancher out, it's a necessary evil, if you want to call it that. We've got to be very flexible as a town if we want quality developments in a 15-acre site and a 20-acre and maybe up to 25. I know there's one for sale in Pearland for 25 right now. Very difficult to navigate that. All these parcels that are that size have challenges. If they didn't have challenges, they would have been developed years ago. So even trying to develop a 10-acre a site for residential is very costly from a you don't have that economies of scale any longer. And so flexibility would be key, I think, for some of these. I think it's necessary for us. Incentives, anything we can do there. The developer will save money, and I think the city would save money 50 years from now when we have to go back and rebuild the infrastructure of a community that's 40-foot lots versus 50-foot lots versus 60-foot lots. For every linear foot of water, sewer, stormwater drainage, let's call it, the streets, the sidewalks, every bit of that, when you have 20% more per house, 40% more per house, is just a cost to the city that's going to be tremendous in years to come. And it is currently for the developer building out the site. So my last comment, I appreciate the tolerance there. The older pockets of the city, Old Town Site, for example, I know that I helped a family with an issue at the city, and my discussions with city staff, wonderful discussions, and they helped greatly, let me add. But that Old Town site, that our rules for our typical suburbia didn't match and weren't a fit, is a better phrase, for Old Town site. And that's something we need to look at. So that's it.
Before we move on, Vance, I think that's part of the Old Town site revitalization and redevelopment is sets of rules for Old Town site that are for Old Town site. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, and I appreciate you opening a window to make that comment. So part of the Old Town Revitalization Plan includes recommendations for the UDC update, which will be certainly shared with Design Workshop and integrated through the conversation.
Fantastic. I told you staff was on it.
Okay. One of the things that I've mentioned many times before is that we, not just Pearland, but a lot of communities in the Houston metro area, maybe all over the state, are gravely missing housing for seniors. We need to not only incentivize somebody to come in, but we need to think what's the best use of a tract of land. I love the cottage court. I think the seniors will love it, but we have so many seniors that are on a 5-year wait list, that to get into something to help them with their housing, they cannot afford their homes or the taxes or the insurance anymore. So they're having to live in pretty dangerous communities in order to pay their rent, and it's very sad, and I think that we could do a lot more. I think there's government support and funding towards that. I just don't know much about it, but I would love for the city to take an initiative in that. And then the other thing is, I think the ADUs should allow a little kitchenette. I think that there was a recent detached ADU where a couple was trying to do this for their mother, but it wasn't approved because of the kitchen. I'm not. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. If I was to build an ADU, no offense to my family, but I don't want them coming into my kitchen in my house if they just want to cook something in their ADU. I think that makes sense to have some type of cooking option in their ADU. And also, a lot of people are not fans of townhomes. I think it's a great way of the middle housing, but every developer that comes wants to rent them and not sell them, and I think that kind of defeats the whole purpose of, missing middle housing for people that want to get into home ownership. And we need to encourage more of the home ownership aspect of the missing middle. So I don't know how we go about why do developers want to rent? None of them want to sell. What is causing that decision to be made? We should look into that. And that's it.
I'm going to piggyback on almost everything you said. I wrote down the exact same notes. I wrote down that we're definitely missing the middle market. That gap between the 2,000 and 4,000 square feet, it's just not available. I wrote that we definitely need more cottages for aging parents. I love the idea of the live-work units. I don't think we have enough of those. And I'm totally on board with clarifying what we have in place for the ADU process.
Well, first off, I'm going to agree with Commissioner Fuentes on the apartment part of this. If every time we bring up renting apartments and stuff, this council fills up. It doesn't make any difference where it's at or where it's at in the city or anything. It's a full-on scale that people get upset about it.
Actually, it doesn't.
Well, I know that
the last 4 that we've had, we've not had a single person here.
On apartments.
Yes.
Well, I know that we've had a lot of negative talk about it as far as letters such as that being brought in on P&Z. Right. And so, Yeah, it's mostly townhomes, especially if they go to rent them. And but you know, it's just if you look on social media, anytime that any of that's approved, y'all get scared. I mean, if it's approved, it's a good thing they don't have the rail and tar and feather anymore, because it gets ugly on social media. Of course, that's just a few, I know, but I'm not a big favor of apartments. Another thing as far as affordability, we've gone from the 60-foot lot to a 40-foot lot, maybe in some places, to try to make the housing more affordable. But the bottom line is we're still trying to build almost 2,000 square foot houses on those lots, and you know, it's young people today, and it's been young people for a while. They want to live in what mom and dad took 25 years to get into. They want to go into their adult life living in what mom and dad took 25 years building. And you know, it's a mindset of availability. There are some affordable homes in Pearland. They're just not brand new homes. They're over in some of the older areas. They're 12 and 1,400 square foot homes, and that's not what they're looking for. Most of the 12 and 1,400 square foot homes are being bought up by people to rent out now. I mean, I think Dixie, Dixie Hollow, over off of Dixie Farm Road, I think not most, but a big majority of those homes in there or a big number of them are rental houses now. I know that every time I see one go up over there, you know, and they're costing $250,000 for a little old, you know, 1,400 square foot house. And but there are affordable homes. It's just the mindset of the young people today. I mean, I'll blame it on my generation and you know, bringing up spoiled brats, I guess. But the bottom line is that's what they're doing. You know, I agree with most everything that they got up there. I do think that, and I know that there are some on council that don't care about or against the ADU because of how do you make sure that person is a relative and such as that. You know, that you can sit there and put things in. You can build all kinds of rules and regulations and stuff. I guess what I'm trying to say is, far as these adult living extra homes and stuff behind somebody's house, you have to depend on the honesty of the people that live in the main house, whether that's a relative or not, unless we come up with some type of way of showing that it's a relative. You know, it having, and I'm from personal experience. My mother lives in a mother-in-law's quarters behind my sister, and she's got a full-blown house. In their subdivision, you cannot rent that out. You can't rent. When my mother is gone, there are no other grandparents that go in there. And I guess if one of her kids or something came back, they could live in there, but they would live rent-free. And the only thing my mother pays for is for cable and electricity, and that's it. But, you know, maybe we come up with some rules like that. I don't know if it's on the homeowners, if the HOAs could build that into their model or not. But, you know, we get into, there's a fine line there that what is acceptable and what will the government back you up? Because I know that in a lot of cases, in particular these type of cases, or somebody that's living behind somebody in a small home there, the government's not real good about backing you up. And when I say government, I'm talking about our state government. So, but that's all I got, you know. Tommy, go ahead.
I do have something. I was doing a little research when it came my turn, and I want to recall my time for a moment. Basically, into the regular world, it's location, location, location. And as I look at this slide on new and incoming housing projects, Pearland is between 39 and 37% from 24 to 25 affordability, from 365 to 375. Friendswood being right at $500,000. I have an acquaintance pretty close to me that is looking to move to Pearland area. And right now she's living over off of West Dallas and Dunlavy, and she's paying $2,400 a month for a 1-bedroom, 750 square foot house. Now she did check into some apartments in our city, and for her and her roommate, they both work from home. So to have a 2-bedroom home with a loft where they could put the offices in our city on Magnolia for a 2-bedroom with loft is $3,280 a month. Now, if you buy a home and you finance $400,000 and you've got reasonable amount of credit and you put 3% down, you're going to be less than $3,000 a month. That's what I was doing the research on. You'll be less than $3,000 a month. So my thing is if we get convoluted into this Senate bill of affordability, once you reach over 150,000 people, you can't compare a Pearland to an Alvin, as well as you can't compare Pearland to a downtown, uptown Heights area, or University or West University. We're not in that ballpark. We're about a 10,000 square foot lot, going to cost you about $1.5 million, and then you have to tear a house down. So affordability, Pearland is what Pearland is. Mm-hmm. Location, location, location. So I would recommend we not get caught up into the webs of society that's dictating to Pearland what we want to be. If someone cannot afford what our housing is, there's cities around us that have a mean. You look at Manville, they're right at $500,000, 4.5, $500,000. You look at Alvin, they're around the 300,000 mark. So it's location, location, location. And I choose to fill Pearland. You know, I'm sorry if some people can't afford, but I've found out in life people can afford what they want to afford. If they can't afford but a $10,000 house, they're going to go buy them a $100,000 vehicle.
Right.
So that's what my recommendation is that we guard ourselves from these state regulations that are trying to force us into quote unquote affordability housing, when affordability housing it is a generic term that needs to also have some placement and some real mean location, location, location. Thank you so much.
All right, let's go to council. Ms. Cade?
I do. I have to. On slide 11, I think, maybe 11 or 12.
Is it this one?
No,
This one?
that one. At the bottom, it says support context-sensitive development. What, did you describe what that looks like? What is context-sensitive development exactly?
Meaning the new development should fit within the context of where it's located. So infill housing would need to, if it's near a neighborhood, be sensitive to that context.
Got it. Thank you. And then on slide, thank you for that.
I was
Slide
going
14.
to say, think of McCard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you said it, it made total sense. I wasn't reading it that way, and I was like, what in the world is
We
context?
get caught up in planner speak sometimes.
Okay. And then on slide 14, right there, permit clustering of smaller homes without altering neighborhood character. How would you do that?
So similar to the last example, if there was an infill lot, cluster home development, you might either subdivide the lot so they can be sold off individually or condoized if it was, depending on how the developer wanted to take it down. But that's what is meant there. And still respecting the context in which that development would lie. So being sensitive to setbacks of existing neighborhood housing.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to point out too on that cluster development that allows sometimes for more flexibility if there's a beautiful tree that needs to be saved and you need to position the homes a little bit differently, a sensitive environmental feature, things like that.
It would allow for that. Questions, comments from council? Mr. Carbone?
Yep, thank you, Mayor. I agree with multifamily. I like to put it in the plan and give developers hope. We don't pass many multifamily projects. We've passed maybe one a year, if that, and that's too much for just about everybody that I hear from. And so I don't know that it makes sense to put that in the plan. I think, encouraging infill development, however we can loosen up the code and make that more cost effective, I think that certainly makes sense. I love what Sullivan Brothers is doing in Old Town Site. Any way to encourage more of that would be great. In terms of, what do we say, allow density bonuses for attainable housing. We've never incentivized green building. I don't know that we want to start. I'm not a fan of that. And I did have a quote from Councilman Koza, since he's not here. He said, and I'll clean it up. So no bleeping way he will approve this UDC if mother blank 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 ADUs are included in the plan. And anybody that knows Koza knows that's probably an accurate quote. So
Yeah.
And Mona would add many more words, but echo the same thoughts and feelings. So for what that's worth, that's
We'll get their thoughts on the record.
Yep.
For sure. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I had a few thoughts. Apartment complexes are always complicated because I think there's a lot of misnomers about apartment complexes. People have assumptions about them that don't really come to fruition. But I think whether it's multifamily or it's cottage courts or it's duplexes or whatever the case may be, I think we need to be targeting the quality of the development more than the affordability of the development. And I think that's more of people's concerns, especially when apartment complexes come up, is they're concerned about the quality of the development and what it's going to bring to the community. So I think that needs to be our focus. I'll agree with Member Carbone. I had that in my notes as well. I like the product that Sullivan Brothers has. There's a couple of infill areas in the community that are hard to develop because they're 10, maybe 15 acres. But something like what Sullivan is doing over there, some of the rear entry product, things like that, that is smaller lot that can be more attainable as a starter home or as a retirement type home when you want something smaller, is something that I think would be good for us to look at. Again, focusing more on the quality of the product, the longevity of the product versus the affordability of it per se. Going through my notes, we have seen several proposals recently of these build-to-rent properties that have come up. And thus far, I believe kind of the directive has been, we don't like the build-to-rent idea in the community. I'd rather see individual tracts, individual homes, individual ownership. So focusing more in that direction, I think, would be where we want to go. Build to rent works in some areas. I just don't see that it works in Pearland, or is heavily desired in Pearland. On the mixed use developments, we've had a few developers, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, I just lost their name, over off of Ivy. In the Ivy district, they were supposed to build a mixed use, and they came in and told us mixed use isn't working right now. They've got a mixed use multifamily product over there right now.
It was the age requirement on the, it was the age requirement for a condo product where, people of an older age are buying the actual condo units, and that's what their original zoning was approved for, and they were trying to remove that and go with just regular multifamily like the one next door. That's
right, but their existing multifamily that they've already built, they're having difficulty.
That was the case.
Renting out. So while the mixed use sounds really great, does the market actually promote for it or allow for it at this point? And then on the issue of ADUs are a hard one. What hasn't been mentioned so far in the conversation of ADUs is the rights of the property owner to use their property the way that they see fit. That's always a needle that is challenging to thread, especially when you have some of the older parts of our community that were developed with large lots. Shady Crest being a great example. We've already had one come in here last year because the parents want to move into the backyard and let the kids, one of their kids live in the house.
We did not.
No, we approved it. Yeah, I'm almost certain we approved it with them sitting right here because they had a lot of support from their immediate neighbors. And we had the conversation on enforcement. And actually, I remember telling them, you guys have to realize what you're allowing in your community because we can't realistically enforce this. Even if we set a rule, like you were saying about, you can't rent it. You just have to we still get down to enforcement. Earlier, we were talking about enforcement on signage. Well, this is a whole nother animal to try to enforce who's living in an ADU and whether they're renting it or not. I was telling Member Kate, in my neighborhood, you can't rent. You can't rent rooms in your house. And I know of at least one, if not two, that rent every room in their house. It's hard to enforce.
Right.
So that's the needle to me. That's going to be the most difficult thing to deal with is how do you enforce it and how are they being used? We've seen problems recently in our community where short-term rentals or ADUs are used inappropriately and it causes problems for the entire community or everybody in the area. So that's a challenge. Member Chavarria had some notes on that as well, concerns that ADUs would be approved initially, come in and say, yeah, we want to build an ADU, and then the property owner turns it into a short-term rental. And how do we resist something like that happening? Poorly managed ADUs could reduce quality of the neighborhood, could run down property values, livability for people in the area. She also commented about the missing middle and having things like we've discussed here and like in your presentation, townhomes, duplexes, cottage courts. I think all of those things can be good products in our community as long as they're not rental properties, they're ownership properties. I think that's where the category changes. And she also brought up the idea of affordable housing. I'll just read what she wrote here. She said she reviewed the 2023 survey. Citizens' top priorities were safety, education, and cultural amenities, the local economy, general affordability, and personal outlook. So why do we continue to focus on affordable housing when the survey we've been out to our community says that's not what they're looking for? So additional comment from Member Chavarria as well. And last one in reference to ADUs, our comment was, if a neighborhood is originally designed and zoned for single family, it should remain that way to maintain the character and intent of the community, and I would agree with that as well.
Mr. Patel?
Thank you, Mayor. Not much to say. I think I concur with most of everything everybody said. If you're going to go back, at least from my point of view, I'm big into ownership, and I'm big into, I think we have a limited resource, which is our land. And I think it's very important that we are possessive of that remaining raw land that we have. And I think it is important for the people who live here, to have a say-so in that on how their community develops. And I concur with most of my council members and as well as the P&Z board that I think apartments are not going to fly. And I know people keep saying mixed use, but if I'm not mistaken, in Ivy District, that was supposed to be a mixed use, if I'm not mistaken. And the developers keep coming to us and saying they're going to do mixed use, and then they come back, they build one component, and then they turn around and they say, "Oh, we need change," and that's not fair to us or the constituents. And I think that's the heartburn I get every time, that they want to change the game after they get certain pieces in place, and then they turn around and say, "Oh, this is not going to financially work for us." And so what I would tell you, I understand that the surrounding areas, people are getting homes, but if you go back to slide 11, the costs are a lot higher. When I was looking at Manuel, the median home is $449,000. Pearland is still pretty affordable, right, compared to our neighbors.
New.
And I guess the way I look at it is, I think last I heard, Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 15% land is not developed in Pearland? And so I'm okay with holding on to it and finding the right builders and not making a rental community and just push. And we've had a lot of people wanting to build rent to own or rental, and we keep saying no because we want people to live here who actually give a crap about our community for long term. And that's really important to me.
Fernandez? Nothing? So, got a lot to say about this, and I'll keep it brief, I promise. Go back to the slide that had the recommendations on it, kind of go down those real quick. I'm going to echo a lot of what was said up here. I think I don't think we need to go out and encourage and say, yes, on this corner or in this particular area, we need multifamily. Let's keep it open. Let's keep it where they have to come in and ask, they have to come in and state their case and bring their development, and our development needs to have certain criteria like no garden-style apartments. We want mid-rise. We want high value to it. I will state the new development on Magnolia. They're coming in at some of the highest rents per square foot of anything in the city, and it's coming in far greater than they exceeded. I think they're leasing up very, very quick. And to go back, the Ivy folks are not having a problem leasing. They are leasing. What they're having a problem with was that second building was supposed to be condo for 80 and 85-year-old people. That's just not gonna happen. That's what they were asking for as far as the change. But as far as multifamily, I agree. We have very, very precious land left, so it needs to be on a case-by-case basis. When it comes to residential, though, we do have a lot of residential land out here, and I think we want high quality. It talks about but at the same time, there is a housing affordability issue, and this is where I think incentives can come in. An incentive can be something like we incentivized in-city MUDs years ago. You could now incentivize those by having PIDs, public improvement districts. So developers coming in, they say, we want to take this 10 acres, 12 acres, we want to turn it into something nice. It's going to be a higher density product, but what do we get out of it? We want quality. We want space within that development for be it parks or being, whatever we want. We don't like the continuous garage look. I had some supplementals that I submitted. We don't necessarily need to throw them up there, but you know, we can incentivize and say, okay, that's what you want. Then we want something similar to what, not necessarily the product, but the thought behind it. Rear entry, we don't want to see garages. We can incentivize and they can come in through the PD process. That's the other thing that we do. We do have a PD process that people can go through. They can come in here. We can give them a quick yay or nay, or we can give them a quick, hey, it's not a no, but you've got a ways to go, and then they can come back. And part of that process can be, at the end of it, they could apply, and we could go through the PID process. They could do the PIDs. They are affordable. You can bring the cost down. So, you know, if you're care to go and look, Development 101 is pretty simple. Developers, if they're developing in a MUD or if they're developing in a PID, they basically sell their lots at cost. They don't make any money on the lot sale itself. Most people aren't aware of that. They don't make any money on the lot sale. They make their money on their reimbursements. And they're trying to get the cost down, because the lower the cost for them, the faster they're going to sell. Interest eats them up, so they want to sell through and get through their developments as quickly as possible. So what we want something that's there long term. We want the sustainability of the development. We want higher value over 20 years. We want that thing to increase in value. So that's the way, like under in-city MUDs, that's where we came back in and required, you know, certain things for detention, certain things for signage, certain things for fencing, amenitize your detention. Don't just make it an outlot on the backside that's grown up in weeds and all of those kind of things. Make it a feature within. So I think we can continue to encourage that. And now that we're kind of creating our first PID, it's a little bit different type of a PID, what I'm talking about, where homeowners would pay an assessment just like they're paying a MUD tax, you know, if you go into a MUD. But as we get smaller and smaller, it's going to be harder and harder to do a MUD. And you can do that through a PID process, and the guy coming into the PID, he has a definite end date to what he's doing. I think encouraging cottage courts, things of that nature, are great. If you had an acre of land in the middle and you had homes all the way around it, they could have basically zero lot lines, 0 yard. What do they have? They've got shared use space right there in the middle. The HOA maintains those types of things. And if that can bring the overall cost of a unit down that's affordable, and make it where it works, I think that works fine. You know, Vance and I've had this conversation on a couple of occasions. You know, the old 2-bedroom, 2-bath, you know, home that, you know, was built in the 50s and 60s, you know, was 1,400 square feet, 1,500 square feet, something like that. That same 2 and 2 now is almost 1,000 square feet or less. And so it's the drawback is going smaller. And I'm not necessarily in favor of just let's go build for affordability's sake. I think because of what we have left, and that is we have a great community, a lot of people want to be in, and we do have some available land. They need to come in here and ask and require. My comments are giving, you know, to staff, here's the types of things I would be in favor of. Here's the types of things, before they ever get in here, this is what we ought to see. And I know you guys vet a lot of that out, and a lot of times you're telling them, you know, that's not going to fly, but they still have a right to come in here. So, but at the same time, we're giving them the information up front. ADUs, it's just a matter of time. The legislature is going to force it down us. So I think we need to be prepared for that. I do like the process that we have in place today. We probably need to be looking at how we tweak that and be ready for it if and when. We're in special session. I don't think there's anything ADU related in this special session, but it might be the next session. So, and by the time the next census rolls around, we're at about 133,000 in the city today. We hit 150, and you know, Katie, bar the door, because here it comes. The smaller lot, SB 15, will be by right. So I think we need to be proactive on what we can work with the development community on. And same thing on multifamily. I think we just need to be cognizant of what will happen, but I think we hold on and get what we want out of development rather than the other way around. On a build to rent, I've said it 100 times. I'm not necessarily against build to rent. Somebody comes in and does build to rent, they need to do it as a single reserve. So that way it gets into institutional hands and it stays in institutional hands long term. Your viability and your maintenance of it's going to be far better than if it's in individual people's hands. So if it's in lot and block, that thing could be sold out 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. And somebody's got 2 units, the next one's got 2 units, they got 2 units, they got 2 units. The chances of that falling into disrepair is going to happen far greater than if it's in a single. When I say single reserve, that means that 15 acres is 15 acres and everything on it goes with it. That means to sell it's going to take somebody with 40, 50, 60, 80 million dollars to buy it. That's going to be in institutional hands. So that's going to be long-term viable in an institutional hand, and that way than it is chopped up. And so, again, I'm not necessarily against it. They would need to come in and make their case. They would need to come in and make the market understand it. We do have some build-to-rent communities in town. They're full. They do well, and they have good rents. Doesn't shock me because we're Pearland and people want to be here, and they'll pay to be here. So that doesn't make me pro them. It doesn't make me negative either. Just I want to make sure that what was coming in is something we want, and it's something we can feel good about once it's built. But giving staff direction that if it's a build-to-rent community, it needs to be all one reserve, not lot and block. How we govern that, past getting that needs to be in the PD process. That they're seeking, what it is that they're seeking. We've had one that slipped by us where they do have lot and block and it's all rental. And we need to make sure that we figure that out on anything in the future. So we can't necessarily govern if somebody buys a for sale product, they can turn around and rent it. We're not saying that market, can't do that. I don't think we can stop that legally. I'll ask legal to help me with that. I don't think we can stop that. Somebody wants to rent their home out, they can. And you go back and look at Zillow right now, there's some 331 units for rent today. West of 288, there's about 368 units between 288 and 35, and some 400 units from 35 to Friendswood. So that's today. I just looked it up and did the numbers, and again, the edges of that might be off a little bit, but so those are happening in our communities. We have rental in our communities. That will continue on. So anyway, I've said enough instead of going through my slides. So we'll open it up for any other questions, comments, staff.
Yeah, Mayor Cole, thank you. Wanted to take a moment just to say a few comments. First is, so ADUs are not allowed to become STRs, just to have that on the record. I'm not saying there's not some that are out there that we need to work and get those into compliance, but an ADU is not supposed to be and will not be permitted to become an STR. Confirming it does sound like the PD path is still the option we want to use for build-to-rent communities or multifamily, and that sounds like CUPs are going to be the path for ADUs. Just to summarize a couple of those things, because direction on those and being specific for design workshop to draft our ordinance is going to be helpful. And so that said, I wouldn't mind even with keeping some of our current options. I would almost want to ask design workshop to maybe draft options to drop in place for whenever we do hit certain population thresholds. And the example that comes to mind is if we get hit with commercial has to allow multifamily by right, to have something plug and play that we could drop.
Well, the way it's written, it's got setbacks, it's got heights. Yeah, it's SB 840. all of it's already in place. It's just, I agree. And it's same thing with ADUs. I think we need to have something in place and ready that we talk about if and when we can be ready to implement something. And if there's anything we can do to guide that process and be our process, not the legislature's process, I think we'll be better off, or at least feel better about it than it's just what it is. So I like it.
Nothing else from me, Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you guys have any wrap-up comments?
I think we have one.
I do talk to multifamily developers quite often. One of the things they tell me is mixed use in Pearland, unless you're on a freeway or super high density, it's never going to work. And I think that's why we have some of the results we've had when they said, oh yeah, we'll phase it in. It's never going to happen. We see if you drive to McHart and Cullen on the northeast corner, that multifamily development, gentleman came back to us on 5 different occasions, I believe, and he kept pitching this product, and we stood hard and fast that you had to phase in commercial, but it had to be up front or at the same time. I was no longer on the Planning and Zoning Commission when he came back the last time, and they granted him that right. And you see what happened. The multifamily got built, and the commercial never did. One office building, and it's half full at best.
It's got one tenant.
Right. I thought I saw a second one coming in, but medical also. But still, you have acres and acres and acres. It'll take it. It won't happen in my lifetime, even if I stay healthy. But mixed use, it's a fallacy. It's never going to happen. Not in the suburbia. It doesn't work. Secondly, well, I'll leave it there.
All right. Don't see anybody following up here. Staff Design Workshop, thank you so much again for the information, the work that we're doing, and just systematically going through this update. Appreciate all the efforts there as well. Vance?
And just before you call it, Claire may have a couple slides to wrap up.
Okay.
I would just want, this one is showing, let's see, I need to get to my notes. The different types of housing and other uses, like farm, accessory buildings, and farms, are currently allowed by right in Pearland's residential zoning districts. So this is something that we'll take a closer look at to make sure that as we're hearing and pulling our recommendations from the engagement that we've had to date, that it still jives with what we're seeing as the by right uses. And then finally, just our schedule for the next time you can expect us down here is September 22nd. There will be a joint meeting, and that's where we are going to go over our code memo that has outlined everything, all the work that we've had to date, and then we'll embark on recommendations, which we'll see you in December with some of those recommendations.
Good deal. All right. With that, we will move to adjournment at 5:33.